Ah, yes, lesbians. Oh no, they're dead. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Gia. I'm a 25-year-old lady who lives in my mom's basement, and today I wanted to talk about Four Dead Queens by Astrid Schulte. I have the Apple Box exclusive, so it is red and not blue. It also came with a cute little insert with all of the queens on it, and it is signed, so I think that that's really neat. I've read this book over Thanksgiving break, and it honestly surprised me in multiple ways, and that's why I wanted to give it its own video. I think that the book does a really great job of setting up expectations for characters that are in the book, and then the characters subvert those imposed expectations. Here is the map of Quadera. In this world, about several generations ago, there was a king who had 4 wives. He decided to take a wife from every quadrant of the country, and they all the quadrants specialize in something different. You have Archia, which specializes in like agriculture, and then Ionia, which is to the north, their science and technology and medicine, and then Ludia is to the east, and they focus on arts and entertainment, and then Toria, they they don't focus on anything specific, but like the Taurians are like a balance of all of it. Like they're the ones that like fall in the middle, and they kind of do everything, a little bit of everything. So the king of Quadera decided that he wanted to have everything that the country had to offer, and he took a queen from each quadrant. And then when he died, those queens decided to rule as one ruling body, and they changed the monarchy of Quadera to always have 4 queens, one from each quadrant, and only a daughter could succeed them. It didn't matter who they had the daughter with, when, or whatever. They just had to have a daughter, so they could have it with whoever. They could marry a man, or they could marry a woman, but they could have the child with whoever they wanted. But then the child that came from that pairing had to go live in their home quadrant and be raised there through adoptive parents. And then once their mother died, they were to be told of their parentage and then brought to be trained to be the new queen. Our story begins with our main girl, Carolee. She is a 17-year-old girl who lives in Toria. She is known as a dipper, who is basically a street rat. So her parents owned a merchant fishing business, and she has been separated from them for quite some time, and we don't know why. But she is in the employ of a Mikkel, who is running a black market auction house. So everything that she steals or is told to steal goes up for auction at this auction house, and then she takes part of the profits from that as her earnings. So she is basically stealing from people to make her living. She has a bit of a past with Mikhail, who's in charge of the auction house. He is known to her as a like quote unquote savior. Like he saved her from the life that she didn't want, which was basically the honest living that her parents wanted her to make. She didn't want to be a fisherman. She believed that basically going to steal from people to make more money in a dishonest way would be better in the long run, because it would drag her family out of poverty. But her parents didn't want to be a part of this dishonest living and just tried to dissuade her from engaging with it, but she would not listen because she wanted better for herself. She also has a bit of a crush on this Mikhail character, and he is pretty shady, but she listens to him because he has given her a place to stay, because she is not talking to her parents or anything anymore. So the day comes where he tells her that she needs to steal something from a very specific person. And this person is a boy a few years older than her. His name is Varen, and he is a messenger from Ionia. They could be comparable to like the erudite in Divergent, where they are very stoic. They're trained from a young age not to have any emotions. That whole like emotions are trained out of you kind of thing. They are told from birth what jobs they're going to have. They are also told at like basically at birth when they're going to die, because the genetic testing and tech is so advanced in Ionia that they're able to look at your genome and see how long you're going to live based on like if you have any predispositions to a certain health issue or something, and then they determine through calculations your death date based on how much resources it would take to keep you alive to a certain age. Carolee is sent to steal from Varen, and what she is told to steal from him are these things called comm chips, and they're basically little microchips that memories can be recorded onto. And you could put them in your mouth and then you can relive the memory, but then you can also record your memory onto the comm chip. And for whatever reason, Carolee is told to go steal these comm chips from Varen, and he is supposed to deliver it somewhere. So Carolee steals the comm chips and then she gives them to Mikhail, and Varen tracks her down and says, listen, like, this is really important. If I don't get this back, they might up my death date and kill me sooner. So Carolee feels bad, and she goes to steal the case back because then she can always just get another job. Well, Mikhail reacts very badly about this and says, you know, you want to steal back from me? You know that that's not how this works. And Carolee is like, this ruthless streak that he has right now is not normal, and she starts to believe that something suspicious is going on. So when she's caught between Mikhail and Varen trying to help a stranger, and Mikhail is starting to act really erratically and wants the comm chips back, Carolee realizes that something is afoot. So instead of giving it to either person, she ingests them, and what she sees are assassination plans to kill all four of the queens: Marguerite, Stessa, Cora, and Iris. In this story, we are getting 5 different perspectives. You're getting Carolee and then every perspective from the queens. Around the same time that Carolee is ingesting the comm chips because something weird is afoot, we are getting the perspective of Iris, one of the queens. She is hearing out one of the farmers that have come to talk to her to say, hey, like, we're not harvesting as fast as we'd like to, and we want electricity so that we can, you know, industrialize faster and supply the rest of the country with food faster. But Iris absolutely refuses this because it is every queen's responsibility to not just do what is best for Quadera, but what is best for their quadrant, because they are like stately and federal representatives. And Iris is very, very serious about maintaining that Archia, which is responsible for agriculture, and they're kind of Amishy in that they don't have any technology. She believes that they need to stick as close to their roots as possible. So no matter how much more advanced Ionia gets and how much more advanced every other person gets and how many more discoveries in medicine that Ionia finds, she believes that Archia needs to stay as archaic, basically, as possible. So she outright refuses, and she is reflecting on the fact that, you know, I understand that everybody wants progress, but I have a responsibility to my quadrant to keep them as close to our roots as possible. This is an unpopular opinion as far as the rest of Archia goes, whereas some of them believe that they should be progressing, at least to have electricity and industry to be able to farm better. We then follow her out into the garden where she is like having thoughts and thinking and reflecting on what she had just done when she is assassinated. Someone comes up behind her and slits her throat. And from the following chapters on, we get perspectives from the other 3 queens as they are trying to figure out what happened to Iris and whether they are next, how will they be next, and then how they are basically threatening each other. There is a lot of suspicion as to who assassinated Iris and whether or not one of the other queens was responsible for it, because there are secrets that become uncovered between all 4 of them that are like big secrets. So this kind of sets the groundwork for the story. You have Carolee and her setting off to kind of stop the assassination of the queens, and then the queens on the other end trying to figure out what happened to the first one. What Carolee sees inside the comm chips is how all 4 queens die. She sees how Iris has her throat slit, that Marguerite is poisoned, that Stessa is drowned, and that Cora dies in a fire. She sees all of their deaths and she goes, we need to figure this out. We need to stop this from happening. But now she's being hunted by Mikhail. So her and Varen have to not only figure out how to re-record the memories onto comm chips again, and then they have to go back to the like where the palace is and get into an audience and talk to the queens. So that's basically their story of like being on the run from Mikhail. And so on the other side, we get to the queens and they're all starting to point fingers at each other. We find out that Cora, who is the queen of Ionia, she was supposed to be trained to keep all of her emotions inside and to not have any, basically, we find out that she and Iris were in love with each other and that they wanted to be together, but there were rules preventing them from doing so. We also find out that Iris wanted to call forth a meeting to discuss this because she wanted to be with Cora publicly. And then we see a lot of how Cora has to suppress her emotions and how the dichotomy between Ionia's teachings of suppressing your emotions and actually having them are it's a duality of sorts, where you're taught to suppress your emotions, but you weren't taught to not feel them. They didn't take them away from you. Editing Gia here because I accidentally attributed part of Cora's story to Marguerite's story. So another thing that makes Cora such a complex character is that although Cora is Ionian, her mother did not subscribe to the same belief that her daughter needed to be basically adopted out into the world and learn how to be Ionian. She got to know her mom over the course of many years, and she faces a lot of imposter syndrome because she doesn't feel as though she's Ionian enough to be the representative of the country because she got to know her mother, got to know what her mother's love was like. She had to put up this front that she didn't actually know her parent, and she kept this secret inside of her for the entirety of her life. So Cora has a lot of insecurity and imposter syndrome about her role in society. She doesn't feel as though she understands Ionian life as much as she should have because she got to actually visit the palace and meet her mom and be a part of her life and actually have that parent in her life. Whereas the other queens have a bit of an insecurity and like mommy issues because they didn't get to know their parent. So that's just another thing that makes Cora really unique as a character. She doesn't feel like the perfect Ionian because she wasn't raised to be, but then she also has this relationship that she has to keep a secret. So anyway, back to past Gia. So Cora is constantly fighting with herself and her feelings about how she felt about Iris and also how she was taught to kind of keep everything inside. Cora starts to suspect that maybe Stessa had something to do with it because Iris had caught Stessa and her advisor in a compromising situation. Stessa is the youngest queen. She's only 16 years old, so she's a year younger than Carolee. And her advisor is from all of their advisors are from their same quadrant. Her advisor was her childhood love. So Stessa was able to petition to get her childhood lover, basically their childhood best friend turned lover, from home to come to the palace so they couldn't be separated, but they also couldn't be together either. So when Iris caught them together, Cora suspected that maybe Stessa had something to do with Iris's death. Now, this turns on its head later because Stessa is the second queen that dies. She is drowned in her pools while she is waiting for the advisor to come. So then her lover, whose name I don't remember, it started with an L. I think I'm just going to call him Larry. So Larry gets mad at Cora and thinks that she had something to do with Stessa's death because Cora knew about them. We then go to Marguerite, who is the oldest queen, and it was time for her to have a child. She had a child with somebody she thought who loved her. Turned out that he didn't. He just wanted to father a princess with the queen, so she hid her pregnancy and then adopted the baby out and then never intended for the child to ever find out their heritage. So Marguerite had a secret pregnancy and a secret baby that is out there that she doesn't know anything about. So she is more of a tragic figure. I thought that she was much more of a like maternal / tragic figure. I felt really bad for her because she thought that the person she had her baby with loved her, but then also she was separated from her daughter. And it's around this time that Carolee kind of catches up to everybody and she gets in front of the queens and all 4 of them are still alive. So it was this race against time for Carolee to get in front of the queens, while from the queen's perspective 2 of them have already died. So now Carolee gets in front of them and they're all still here. So I was like, okay, is this like a mixed timeline thing? Because Carolee is afraid that all of the queens are already dead and nobody has said anything. So she gets in front of the queens and she explains what's going on, but they don't believe her. But then a lot of weird things started to happen. And this is where the story really took a turn for me, becoming much more than I originally thought it was. B-roll Gia back again. to say that I honestly thought up until this point that Carolee was going to be the secret daughter of Marguerite. So after I found out about Marguerite's child, I don't remember the exact timeline, but I think it was uh, basically setting up that Carolee was the same age as Marguerite's secret daughter that we didn't know anything about up until this point, didn't know who she was, where she could be, that I thought that potentially Carolee was the secret daughter. There was no other way I could think of that she as our chosen character would be put in this situation where in the beginning of the story, Mikhail didn't want her to have the comm chips, but she ingested them anyway, and that Mikhail was acting really strangely, and that it seemed to be a pretty viable explanation for him acting strangely for her to have the comm chips. This was something else that I thought was an interesting subversion because the whole story sets Carolee up to not only be the heroine of the story, but to be like the chosen one of the story. That ends up not being the case, and I think that that is a really good subversion. But anyway, back to A-roll Gia. And it was a little confusing. It was a little confusing, but I think I have it figured out. So Carolee starts to have some lapses in memory, and I thought that this was maybe a fault in the writing. I started to be like, okay, like the timelines aren't really lining up. I don't really get what's going on. Like a lot of weird things started to happen. Like Carolee had a gash on her knee, and Varen told her like you gotta stop like falling or you're going to like leave blood everywhere. And then she like blacks out and then looks down and she was like, oh god, I have blood on me again. Like Varen's right, I really gotta stop being so clumsy. And I was really confused as to what was happening there. But then all of a sudden Carolee is trying to, from Carolee's perspective, she is trying to stop the killing of all four of the queens, only for all of the queens to die anyway, until we get to the point where Marguerite was poisoned and Carolee gets arrested. Varen turns against her and turns her in. Mikhail is there and they turn her in. Varen is like, no, you're the assassin. You're the one who did it. I swear it. And Carolee is like, I swear it's not me. I didn't do it. And Varen doesn't believe her. Nobody believes her. But she doesn't have any memory of this happening. In fact, she has very little memory at all. So she just keeps proclaiming her innocence and to Varen saying, like, have I ever given you a reason not to trust me or to believe that I would do something like this? And he's like, but I saw you do it. But I saw you do it. And it turns out that she had a bracelet on her hand that everything on her bracelet turned into a weapon. That one of them was could turn into a knife. That one of the charms on it was a fire starter. That one of them had vials of poison in it, so she was able to conceal all of the ways she could kill the queens based on her bracelet, the bracelet that was given to her by Mikhail. So she is very confused as to what's going on here. She's locked up preparing for her execution, and then we get the perspective of a new character. And this new character, we find out, is Marguerite's daughter, who is bitter and upset that she was not granted the ability to know who her mother was, that she was lied to, and that she wants to become queen, and she wants to not only become queen, but become the queen, because she is bitter and vengeful. So she hatches this plan with Mikhail. Her adopted mother was friends with Mikhail's mother, and they became like childhood friends to lovers. And then they started to work together to figure out how to assassinate the queens to get her in charge, and then Mikhail would be her advisor. So I don't remember what her name was, but Marguerite's daughter is out for revenge, and she hatches this plan to get Mikhail involved, and Mikhail uses Carolee as the scapegoat by using an illegal comm chip that is experimental technology that in testing, it made people act really weird. They used this prototype comm chip to control Carolee because she ingested them believing that if she ingested them, that Mikhail wouldn't get his hands on them. But what it actually happened is that Mikhail meant for her to do that. So she ingested the chips willingly, but what she did was ingest the plans that then she was told to execute. So she actually was the assassin because she was being mind controlled. Marguerite survives the bulk of the poisoning, and they are able to revive her and bring her back. So what Carolee sees as killing Marguerite, Marguerite ends up living through, but the other three queens do end up dead. Because of this, Marguerite's daughter is in front of the council and is trying to goad them and convince them to change the queenly law that if there are no other queens from the other quadrants and there are no female relatives that can be located, that in this event the one ruling monarch can be in charge of all of them, and they were going to have her claim all of the powers and rights to be rulers of the other quadrants so that she could be the one ruling queen. But this stops because Marguerite is revealed to be alive. So they arrest the daughter, and Carolee and Varen go off on their own to start over, and Marguerite is the sole queen of Quadera at the end of the story. What I enjoyed about this is how many subversions there were, because I saw this most with Cora and Iris, because you had Iris, who was really intent on keeping her quadrant as archaic as possible. I mean, she wanted to keep electricity out of there. She was a very serious person. And then you had Cora, who was from a quadrant that was teaching its children to suppress their emotions and look at facts and logic and knowledge as superior to emotion. So you have this character, Cora, who is rebelling against everything she's ever taught to love somebody that she technically can't have. And their love story is very upsetting, that they were unable to be together for real, that they had to hide everything behind their secrets. And I just found that it was interesting that every person had their secrets about themselves, where Marguerite also had her secret about her child, that she was supposed to have a child, that she was the oldest out of all the queens into her 30s, and she kept rejecting suitors because she had a kid, but she wanted this kid to remain a secret. So she, up until this point into her mid-30s, was still unable to accept that she needed to have a child, to have somebody surpass her. So, she was kind of running from her past in a sense. And then you have Stessa, who just is unable to grow up, and she's very, very selfish, that she is engaging in this secret relationship with her advisor that is against queenly law, even though she just got to the palace and should be, riding the line as close as possible. But she is very, very selfish, and she decides that she can have her cake and eat it too. So you see all of the characters and how their secrets kind of follow them, and in multiple ways, like Marguerite running from her past, but Cora and Iris having this star-crossed lovers thing, and then Stessa being extremely selfish. We find out that one of Carolee's main motivations to get the assassinations to the queens is that there is a medical treatment that is proposed in Ionia. I don't remember what it's called, but only one dose is given out per year, because this miracle medicine that can heal you of anything on the surface outside of changing your genetic code came from a person. It was synthesized from a person, almost like their blood was the cure to everything. And because this person died, they only had so much of this cure, and only one person was selected every year for this miracle cure, that one person could be cured of anything that ailed them, and the waiting list was super long. We find out that part of Carolee's guilt and why she can't go back to her family is because in a moment of immaturity, she crashed her parents' fishing boat because she didn't want to live the same life as them. She wanted to live this dishonest lifestyle and steal from people to make a dishonest living, because she thought that it was going to be worth it in the end to be able to have more money, when it wasn't, because she crashed her parents' fishing boat, ruined her parents' way of life, and then as a result, the accident caused her father to get injured to the point where he was in a coma. So she was too ashamed to go back to her family. So part of her thing is that she wanted to go tell the queens everything so that she could bargain for that year's dosage of that medicine so she could atone for her sins and save her dad. And Varen has his reasons, because his death date in Ionia was set to age 30, and he's only 19 years old. He only has 11 more years left to live, because there is a marker in his genome that shows that he could develop a degenerative eye disease that causes him to go blind at a really early age. In the end, Marguerite was deciding to go on a tour of all of the quadrants to kind of figure out how they all lived, because she was going to be the sole ruler from then on. And she asked Carolee and Varen what they wanted. Of course, Carolee and Varen fell in love like over the course of their journey, but she asked them what they wanted, and they basically said that they just wanted to start over and like be able to live their lives normally and be free from all of the nonsense that they had gotten themselves into. And Marguerite was like, you know what? That's really fair, because they were invited to come work for Marguerite at the palace, and Carolee was just like, you know what? I've had enough excitement for a while. So they kind of go off and like live on their own a little bit, and the book ends. This is a standalone book. Like, there is no sequel to this book. As far as I know, Astrid Schulte doesn't want to write a follow-up to this book, but for a standalone 400-page book, I was extremely surprised at the quality of the plot and the content of it. I'd say that the only thing that really bothered me was I don't recall how old the daughter was, Marguerite's daughter. I think they said she was like 14 or something. I didn't really enjoy her as a character because she was like really textbook evil to the point of it being laughable. But I also didn't like how, okay, like I have a lot of respect for authors who don't shy away from including sexual content in YA books that kind of show the like exploration of teenage sexuality and whatnot. But what I do have a problem with is the implication that sex is only for bad girls, because this doesn't happen with Carolee, where she has her first kiss with Varen, and it's like very, like, kind of cute. But when it gets to Marguerite's daughter, it shows how she and Mikhail are in cahoots, and she's like in love with Mikhail. Mikhail is clearly using her, but like she's in love with him, and they like conspire on their evil plans together and laugh evilly into the sunset, and then they have sex. It's like, I didn't like how sex was represented as something that only happens to with like between bad girls and bad boys, as if it's like something only villains do. That was my only thing, was like those two things. There was of course the, you know, the teeny bit barrier gaze. It's like, ah, yes, lesbians, oh no, they're dead. I appreciated that there was a lesbian couple, with one of them being a woman of color. However, did they both have to die? I thought that it was good representation to have two queens who are black and then one who is in a lesbian relationship with another queen. But did they have to die? A little bit of bury your gays there, but like it wasn't like they died because they were gay. I think that there's a distinction between bury your gays because they're gay and bury your gays because they just happened to die while being gay. So I think this falls under the second category. That was a step forward in as far as LGBTQ plus representation. In the future, I would like my lesbians to live. I don't think that that is too much to ask for. Anyway, this was not an anticipated video. I just really, really liked this book. It took me by surprise when I read it over Thanksgiving break, and I wanted to dedicate a book review to it on its own because I thought that it was really engaging, and I thought that it was better than I anticipated. I bought this book several years ago when I was trying to do this thing where every Black Friday I would buy like a bunch of used books from my favorite genres, and then I would spend the next year reading them and then like branch out from there, basically to like use it as a jumping off point to read more. But I never, of course, read them. So to come back to this book after I had it on my shelves for God knows how many years, and then to finally read it, I was really surprised that this hidden gem has been behind me this whole time. So if you have not read this book, I would recommend it. I rated it 4 stars, and yeah, that is how I feel about Four Dead Queens. That is all for me today. If you'd like to find me anywhere else, you could find me on Twitch, Twitter, and Instagram at HuntressGia. The Instagram has an underscore. And remember to drink water and be nice to each other and exude kindness and empathy with everything that you do. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!